Hello, welcome everybody. This is Neil with PortalToAscension. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are about to embark on an epic panel and discussion that we've been building up momentum for, and very excited for this discussion. And perfect time of the year, right? Having the solstice, the Christ consciousness energy that we have collectively agreed upon. So this is actually the beginning of multiple events in which we're going to be exploring Christ consciousness over this entire month. Next week, we have the Cosmic Christ with the Hurtaks. Today, we have Jesus and New Vision with Whitley Strieber, Doctors JJ and Desiree Hurtak, and Alan Steinfeld. And then I'm going to be doing a presentation on the pagan roots of Christmas and New Year's Eve on the solstice. And we have an all-day solstice event. So we're really going full throttle this season with a lot of epic awareness and information that is festive and very informative. But today is Jesus and New Vision panel, and I'd like to welcome everybody joining in on New Realities YouTube, on the Facebook pages, and on PortalToAscension. If you are new to our channels, please go ahead and click subscribe and join. Between Alan and myself, we're putting out so much content all the time. It's really a stream of awareness that is just designed to help uplift and transform us so that we can be the caretakers of this world that we're now creating. I'm going to share a link right now for everybody, all 154 people in the Zoom room. I'm sharing a link, and this link right here is actually the link to the live on YouTube. So if you would like to take this link and go ahead and share it across all your platforms with your friends and families, text it to people, put it in a Telegram group, whatever you want, share that away. And to support us, everybody on Zoom, you can go ahead and click that link and click subscribe and then get a lot of our content there as well. And I know the majority of the people in the room right now are on our email list. So if you want to not only just get our emails in which we're telling you about all our events coming up, but also our daily broadcasts on YouTube, then go ahead and do that right there. So without further ado, everybody, let's get into today's panel. And I'm going to go ahead and bring on someone that is very dear to my heart, that I've been working with very closely for quite some years now, and is really a pioneer in this awareness, and also creating more content than he's ever done before, really just coming out with a lot of information and sharing his heart and his true intention with all that he does. So let's go ahead and hand it over to you, brother. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Neil. It's, me and Neil and a bunch of other people are really trying to get to the cutting edge of what conscious evolution is. Who are the people coming forward with new information? Who's leading us into a really divine future, I have to say. And the guests here are three of the most important leaders of our time. I mean, I've worked with Dr. JJ and Desiree Hurtak for the past maybe 20 years. They're probably my most often interviewed guests. We have a whole series of talks we've been doing. But today's talk is something they really specialized in, the teachings of what Jesus, the avatar, as they call it, why that's so important for today's time. And they are some of the best scholars, religious researchers. They've translated this book, the Pista Sophia, which, there it is, which is the commentary or the talk by Jesus after the resurrection. And they are the translators from the Coptic into English. And I think this is one of the only full versions of the Pista Sophia there is. So they've researched this on religious terms, spiritual terms. And I would say, before I introduce Whitley, is that Jesus, whatever he is probably the most talked about person in history. I mean, 2,000 years since, he is still like a major topic of interest, concern, and importance. And that brings me to Whitley Strieber, who's just last year wrote a book called Jesus, A New Vision. And I just want to read from his introduction. He says, "I have only one agenda here, to explore how we can use the teaching of Jesus and an example of his life to find a way out of the emptiness of our world and our lives. It concerns not only the emptiness of disbelief, it is about the emptiness of belief." So to start off, I would say these two groups, Whitley and the Hurtaks, have complementary but not always agreeing points of view. Whitley's, I think, and you can correct me, comes from the place that Jesus as a human being evolved to the place where he became the Christed being and realized the potential that exists in who we are as humans. The Hurtaks think Jesus was an avatar who came already in with these higher exceptional powers to lead us into a new time. Me, I'm neutral. I never even thought of Jesus growing up being Jewish, but when I started to read what he had to say, I said, wow, this is valuable teachings. So let's start in the place where you two agree, which is at the Shroud of Turin, which is behind me here. On the right side is the picture of Jesus from the shroud. On the left are what they say. They say the shroud, well, there's many reasons why the shroud is real. One is because of the face of Jesus that was copied. The long nose was something that painters had used since the Middle Ages, because in the History Channel special on this, it said that they found the shroud and they were copying the image of Jesus in shroud. So let's go to the shroud first, because that's a point of agreement. The Hurtaks have seen the shroud. Do you want to talk about the scientific analysis of the shroud, and what do you think it is, JJ, Desiree?
We're seeing, of course, this picture and then the manifestation of what most scholars believe is the authentic face of Jesus the Christ that is behind the shroud. And we would like to, again, extend our greetings to all of you, especially Whitley, for his great book. We have been involved with scientific studies on the shroud. And some years ago, I participated as a consultant with Don Lin at Jet Propulsion Lab in Los Angeles, a branch of Caltech. And he developed the image enhancement technology, as we see here, that brought out a three-dimensional profile of Jesus out of the cloth. And so for this to take place, there would have to be a homogeneous distribution of energy throughout the shrouds. It could not be painted on, it was there. We've done extensive studies. I'm a member of the Association of Scholars and Scientists investigating the Shroud of Turin. After the major conclusions were made in the 80s that there was a medieval fraud. To the contrary, we have found that there is evidence to show that this is a genuine artifact. And even Ray Rogers at Los Alamos, one of the leading scientists, changed his opinion and has come aboard with us to say that there is further investigations needed because, in his opinion, this is a real image of the Christ.
Right. So what does this really mean? And I'd love to get Whitley's scenario on this too, because this is, I think, so important in your book that you just came out with. But basically, it means that the matter body can literally become a light body. And I think that that is tremendous. You know, a lot of scholars, Dr. Chekhov says, you go to Harvard Divinity School, you come out being like, big questions whether Jesus is even, a
historic person.
A historic person. The idea is that many people didn't take the resurrection in a literal way, but now we're starting to understand, and scientists, including those in Italy and the US, are starting to realize, yes, you can take not only light into matter, but matter back into light. And that means a real lot for our future too. We talk about light body all the time. That's a reality. It's not something was faked 2,000 years ago. Whitley, what do you think about it?
Yeah, Whitley, why is it so?
Oops.
All right, why is it? Oh, go ahead. Why is the shroud such an important point in Jesus: A New Vision?
Well, let me, if you will bear with me, I'm going to give a rather long answer. I want to start with the at the tomb, and just before that, what I did with my work with Jesus: A New Vision was to go back to the earliest material that I could find and to dispense with all of the English translations and read the Greek in Greek and work through it on my own, in my own translations, which was a terribly difficult task because my Greek is not, it's beyond rusty. I was a good fair Greek scholar in college, but I pulled it back together as best I could. And starting there, I took a new look at the entire gospel, all of the gospel material, including the Apocrypha. And then also at the history of the shroud, which is a very extraordinary history. And I looked for logic in it, because history has the logic of the necessary. In other words, when you read real history, you are generally reading about things that had to be done out of necessity. And here's what I found about why the shroud would still exist, or would not have been left to be destroyed with the body of Jesus. The body of Jesus was placed in the tomb inside an unusual, a very unusual shroud. It's made of linen with a herringbone weave of a type that was quite rare at the time. And in other words, it's a very fine piece of cloth, and probably woven in India or Egypt, and was probably the finest piece of cloth of its kind in the whole area in Palestine at that time. And so to choose to wrap the body of a convicted criminal in it, especially when even the bodies of the most exalted personages were generally wrapped in cotton, was an exceptional decision. Now, why was the shroud removed? I think there can only be one answer. The body was indeed no longer in it. And we will, in other words, when the women went to the tomb, they did find it empty, and the shroud was still there. Now, you would think, why would it be then taken in its first journey, which was to Edessa, which at that time was outside of the Roman Empire? And this was important because under Jewish law, any burial cloth had to be destroyed. And the shroud was probably taken surreptitiously to the closest place outside of the Roman Empire that they could reach from Jerusalem. Why did they want to preserve it? Well, this gets back to, if you do a very careful reading of the Passion story, you find there is someone hidden in it. Not one person, but there's a group of people hidden in it. The upper room was owned by somebody that Jesus knew, whose name we never know. The dinner there was prepared for the apostles. There was a horse or a little donkey waiting for Jesus the night before before Palm Sunday. Somebody put it there. It belonged to someone. The palm fronds were a costly, not a terribly costly item, but they cost money. They didn't just appear out of nowhere. They had to be cut, gathered, stored, and arranged, and the crowd had to be organized. Not only that, at the same time that this, what was actually a mockery of the entrance of Herod on the other side of the city was taking place, this carefully organized procession entered the city. Jesus then went about essentially committing suicide by crucifixion. It was an intentional act. He violated not just the Jewish laws, but the Roman laws very carefully and very intentionally, so that he would be condemned. Now, and these crowds are very strange, because on Palm Sunday, a huge crowd welcomes him into the city, calling Hosanna and declaring him king. Then the next crowd we see presumably a crowd of people from Jerusalem, since it takes place in Jerusalem. Not only is it the dead of the night during the Passover feast when Jews don't leave their houses, this crowd is inexplicably hostile. So we're looking at a kind of a drama of some kind. Jesus ends up on the cross. He dies there. Then in the tomb, we see mention of an earthquake. We see that something happened in the temple to cause the great drapery to split, and it was very heavy. And one of the things that would have caused it to split was if the rack holding it had broken, and then the weight of the whole apparatus would have quite definitely caused that to happen. Now let's go to the shroud itself. It takes a long journey. It surfaces finally in France in the possession of someone, oddly enough, with the last name of de Molay. The very same last name with a slightly different spelling of Jacques de Molay, the just recently executed head of the Templars. Apparently, this de Molay was a relative, and the shroud surfaces apparently in an attempt to continue to preserve it, and it ends up in a church. And from then on, we have a pretty good idea of where it was. And I think it got there for the simple reason that the Templars were being destroyed, and they wanted to get the shroud out of their own hands and into the hands of the church, which would preserve it. I think that's why it originally surfaced when it did. The next thing that happens is in 1898, a photograph is made of the shroud. And suddenly we have not just the mysterious image on the Shroud of Turin, which had been attempts had been made to copy it many times, such as the one that's behind on Alan's left, but we have the image on Alan's right. It's a photograph. It is simply a photograph. How would it be that a photographic image would be left on that shroud in the 1st century AD, when the idea of something like that is completely unknown? It's not a miracle. It is a natural outcome of the sudden and extraordinary burst of energy that body became. It became light. We know that the shroud fell in on itself because of the perspectives that we see. We know that the energy was neutrons because the blood on the shroud, which we know now is certainly human blood, is still red. I will tell you this: if you cut yourself, make a little cut, and drop it on a piece of linen, in 2 weeks it's going to be dark brown, in a month it's going to be black. So something happened to this blood, and we know precisely what did happen to it, because we've experimented. In the 1950s, there were extensive experiments in the UK with blood, and they were experimenting with the effects of radiation on everything so that they could plan for possible nuclear attacks. And one of the things that happens to blood is that its coloration is preserved more or less indefinitely. There are many other signs, I don't want to be too long-winded here, that show that a burst of neutrons went through that cloth in all directions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then he became a creature of light. He became a man of light. Now, the best way to think of this is this. Jesus used to say, "The kingdom of heaven is within you, and we look into our minds and we think, there's no kingdom of heaven in here. That's not right. That's not where we're looking. The kingdom of heaven is the body. The body is the kingdom of heaven slowed down. Just as Einstein made the brilliant comment that matter is energy slowed down. Jesus knew how to re-intensify and speed up the body and transform it into light. He became light.
The Jet Propulsion Lab scientists said that the Jesus figure was in a state of weightlessness, surrounded by superluminal light.
Right, and one of the reasons Alan's been showing the one picture, but we've actually seen physically the shroud twice in the last so many years. They only open it occasionally for when the bishop or the pope wants it, but actually it's a long cloth. So it has the bottom of it and then it goes over to the top. It's hard for me to point this out backwards on the screen. So it's actually quite long. You see the head and the back. And why what Whitley is saying is accurate is because there's just as much light energy, or we'll say impression of image on the shroud in the front as there is on the backside. There's another image, Alan, if you can find it at some point, that actually shows the top and the bottom together, because it's this long cloth.
And the front and the back as well, you're saying.
Yes, exactly. And the fact, one of the things that Jet Propulsion Lab and the STIR project thought was so amazing is that it really had the same amount of impression of the front and the back. Now, another thing that the STIR project thought was interesting, if you want to go back to your picture, is that, everyone always thought that it was the hands where the nails were placed. But if you look very closely, it's the wrist. You can see the wrist right there is the blood. And they figured out, and they did testing on this, that the hand itself has too much fiber. You can't hold a body by the actual hand. So even though people had stigmata, for whatever reason, it's more of a vortex point, I would say, or an energy chakra zone. But the actual body itself was probably nailed at the, we'll say, at the wrist instead of.
What do you think of what Whitley was saying about the mechanisms, the light, turning the body into light?
Yeah, that's
well, Eric Jumper and John Jackson, who were two of the principal scientists working with the STIRP, said their personal belief was Jesus' body was sublimated because the energy was so intense.
And that's what I said at the end of my talk earlier, that we go from matter to light very easily. In fact, light to matter is just the condensation of light. And we see that even with our own DNA and our work with Peter Garayev and others.
One of my students has illustrated this as a biophotonic burst of energy around the body of the Christ.
But we believe even our DNA comes from a light energy frequency that then concretizes into a specific, we'll say, matter language on this side. But it's easy to also reverse that. And Peter Garayev, who's now passed away, but if you ever want to look at his research, it's fabulous, that he felt that really you can heal the body by tuning into the frequency vibrations that still exist as DNA in a light energy way. And that's why all of life is really vibration. It's really concretized at this point. But there were a few other great things that also came out. And just to confirm the shroud, Dr. Hurtak, why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, in recent times, in the last 10 years, scientists from Italy, from Greece, and from Germany have looked with even finer optical instruments, image enhancement technology, to see that there's actual writing that was overlooked by the STIRP group in the shroud.
So what they think is that there was a face cloth, a death certificate that was placed on top of the shroud over the face. And the ink of that, however they were using ink 2,000 years ago, came off and now can be read on a certain part of the shroud. And
for example, on one side, you'll see the word Nazarene. On the other side, you will see the Greek word for death. That was, he was lifted off the cross as a dead
well, it just says
person.
It's really a death certificate that was placed on the shroud. So that's another confirmation.
So we have Greek, Latin, and Aramaic notation. This is so important because some of you know my work is the Keys of Enoch. In 1973, I made an anatomical drawing of the Christ that I saw in a higher consciousness experience, surrounded by light with the Aramaic letter hovering over his beard. And the new scholarship has seen that underneath the chin area, there is this Aramaic letter. Desiree's pointing to this.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And another thing, just in case people have read things and said, oh, didn't they discover it was like a middle-age forgery, so to speak, from the medieval periods? But what happened when the JPL Stir project went forward to get material from the shroud? And as Whitley clearly said, the shroud itself is linen. But as you can see in some of this, there was a major fire actually, and some of these artifacts on the two far sides were like burns. And it seems that the nuns in France probably copied the herringbone weave into, but used cotton. And so when the Stir project took a small part of the outer, the church would not give them something from the inner, but from the outer, which they thought was perfectly fine.
The edge.
From the outer edge, they felt that they found it was cotton. So they realized, even though they had done all these testings, when they did the testing, it came back cotton, and they're going, what do you mean cotton? It's really linen. So, what's wrong here? Well, it seems that the nuns had perfectly tried to restructure the cloth that had been burnt in a fire. And so therefore, it shows what they were analyzing was at the time of the nuns, not at the center of the cloth, which is the linen. And you can see even the head and everything like that, where the, we'll say the thorns were and the blood was.
But it's interesting that the light in these pictures of the shroud, it's coming through the crown chakra and up from the feet. I also think in the reading of the gospel, Mary begs the Roman soldiers not to break the legs. And I think there's something about that allowed the energy to flow through in order to illuminate.
You're reading from an apocryphal text, not in the original gospel. So it simply says in Luke's gospel, chapter 24, that when Mary went in, there was the apparel, what we call the shroud. And that is the issue of historic curiosity, and now scientific work throughout the world that we're connected with has shown the authenticity of this as a genuine historic artifact.
All right. Well, I agree with, there's an agreement here, but what do you think of Whitley's idea of the radiation? And that was a great
no, absolutely,
because I had never heard that, because people asking how could a linen shroud exist for 2,000 years or more?
No, well, the Italians actually have done research using ultraviolet light, and it shows how this really the only emanation that could have made this literally was light radiation. They've looked, there's not the paint, there's not the dyes, and that's exactly what Dr. Jekyll was showing, that you actually cannot, in the three-dimensional form, you absolutely cannot take a painting like that you would paint and get the actual 3 dimensions. You have to have this by light radiation. That's the only way you can get this image, which they got from taking the image of the cloth and making it into 3 dimensions. You could not have done that if someone had painted it.
The cloth is speaking through history. Behold the image, ecce homo. Behold the miracle of the light, the biophotonic light burst. And we see this also as a instruction for all of us going through all of the planetary changes, that ultimately when we go through the death process, we are surrounded by what is called the manifestation of this change of the energy field.
But definitely, like I said, the Italian researchers have shown that if you go from matter, you go through the ultraviolet portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, you will get an imprint on the cloth like this, and then you can go on into the light frequency vibrations.
Right.
A quick question.
What I want to ask Whitley
Alan, I want to add something really quick. Just because we had a question in the chat room, and I do want to just ask it, and if we can briefly answer this so we can continue. Someone's saying that do you believe in stigmata, and the stigmatas happen in people's palms, not in the wrist? Any comment on that?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Actually, it's really more, I think, the energy points of the body that was seen as that. And all I can tell you is that the shroud's showing the wrist. And when they did a study of putting the arms out and putting like something in the arm, in the wrist itself, you could not hold the body. It would actually just rip the skin and fall through.
I think the crucifixions of most people were through the wrist, because it is the wrist that will hold the weight of a body.
But it doesn't mean we heal with energy from our hands, from the top of our head, as Alan was saying, from the bottom of our feet. This is the points of the body, the chakras. Alan's an acupuncturist, and he knows about some of this.
But I wanted to ask Whitley, what does it mean? And the Hurtaks will jump in after the process of it. What does it mean as a potential for the human being? What is the lessons that we see here about the life and death and resurrection of this being, Whitley?
Well, we have to understand that the ancient world knew much more about the body as a spiritual instrument than we do now. A good place to begin study of this is in Schwaller de Lubitsch's work about the Temple of Luxor and its relationship to the body, because there are many secrets in that temple about the flow of energy within the body. And in the pyramid text, in the Pyramid of Unos, which is our oldest religious text, and I think of it not so much as a religious text, the oldest religious text, but as the last text of soul science that ever was ever written down, and probably the only one that's ever been preserved that we found so far. It discusses the chakras actually in this way. It describes the spine as a column of light and as a serpent of light. In Genesis, this serpent, this is a very, in the anthropology of religion, you will see this again and again. The serpent comes out of the body and its role is reversed and becomes something evil. But in the early text, what this is doing is that it is accelerating experience that's being gathered by the body and accelerating it in such a way that it becomes food for the soul. And the 7 chakras in the pyramid text are called the 7 tanitter, that's 7 instruments, I guess would be a good way to describe it. And they are the spine is a serpent of light, and these 7 swirling energies, if you will, swirling around it, are gathering the information from the body and directing it into the spine. And in those days, the Egyptians thought of the mind as being seated in the heart, not in the head, which is very important because it happens to be the truth. We think, oh, well, that was just them. They had no idea what anatomy really is. But that's only because we have become very headstrong and we're not very heart strong. But if you work on being heart strong, then you begin to understand the path that you're talking about or asking about, Alan, because this is suddenly, you're looking at a heart path. The 42 negative laws of Ma'at are the original idea that became eventually the 10 Commandments, and then were distilled again into the Beatitudes, and now can be thought of in a very simple and straightforward way that was taught to me by my wife after she died, which is that the human being must live by love, compassion, and humility. These 3 things are the accelerant, and it requires the whole being, the heart as well as the head and the physical body, to enact a life in the good. If you do this, as Annie said so beautifully when I asked her what enlightenment was, she said, enlightenment is what happens when there is nothing left of us but love. And in that tomb, that body, already experiencing rigor mortis, still had living within it the fire of the spine. and that fire blazed up.
We
and
agree.
the story of Jesus after the resurrection.
And as you know, we did work in Egypt. This is a picture of light manifesting inside the Great Pyramid, which is the tomb of the Pharaohs, according to classical Egyptologists, using Hebrew and Greek mantras of the name of the Father and the Christ. This light manifested itself. And in that earlier picture I showed Whitley while you were speaking, drawn by one of my students, shows the human body, the spinal system, the Hebrew letters, also the Greek that is used to induce energy up the spine.
And I just want to say, it's interesting, you know, we're born, this is part of why we feel it's really light first, then matter back to light. And when we're born, strange enough, we're born with 33 spinal column bones, so to speak, and they merge at the end towards when we get to be adults. Some of them merge. So we end up with an interesting number. We end up with, 7 in terms of the upper cervical spine, 12 for the thoracic spine. These are all kind of interesting numbers you've been talking about, the 12 disciples, the 7 days of the week. This is all part of this mathematical unfoldment. And then we get the lumbar, which is the 5. And there's many aspects for why 5 is a key number of life. And then there's 2 more, the sacrum and the coccyx. But if you don't count the sacrum and the coccyx, you get the 24. Well, 24 is like the 24 elders. So the mathematics, like the tombs of Egypt, are incredible. I mean, they're all based on mathematical scenarios that are present in terms of the cosmic, we'll say, unfoldment of life. And that's why we feel, all of us, not just Jesus, but all of us in some way are part of that energy, light, mathematical unfoldment. Of course, what's important in that is exactly what you said, Whitley, and that is the consciousness that's behind it.
Because most mystical scholars see the mathematics of the body as the tabernacle of light.
Let me talk a little bit about the mathematics of the body, if I could. Jesus speaks in the Gospel of Thomas, which I regard as probably the earliest and most authentic of the Gospels, of the 5 trees in paradise. These are the 5 trees. There is the tree of 3, which is the male tree. It is active, passive, and reconciling. That is to say, it is the body of this thing. And then the female tree, which is the cup, which is active and passive, already in balance. This is why the woman can create life, can create babies in the cup of her womb. When you add these 2 together, you have union. You have the 21st card of the Tarot, which if you look at the Tarot of Marseille, not at later Tarots, but just at that one as it was originally drawn, you will see a figure ascending. This figure has breasts and an ambiguous face and hair and a cloth across its midriff, so you can't tell its physical nature. Was it male or female? And the reason is it is both. It is both energies united as one. And that was also in our journey when it first started, my wife and I. Annie knitted us a cross stitch from Ecclesiastes: 2 are better than 1, and a cord of 3 strands is not quickly snapped. The 3rd strand is love, it is children, it is life, and living life to the good.
Well,
in the Christus Sophia, we have this amazing picture. This is the Lost Gospel of Jesus, 2nd century. And I'm holding up this picture of the 2 saviors, so the inner and the outer. The concept of the tree of life is personified. And they also mention the 5 trees and the 7 amens, some of these codes that were used by the early Christians. So this was common knowledge. Today we'd say the 5 trees are the electromagnetic body, the epikinetic body or epigenetic of vibration, the eka-body of the higher universal self, the inner biological, which is the Gematrian body, and the Zohar body, which is the paraphysical body of supraliminal light. So in short, our body is a biotransducer. We are all on the Christ experience, of realizing that we are eternal beings in human form.
And that's what I was saying about consciousness. The thing that's overriding the mathematics, and you have people like Max Tegmark saying all life is mathematics, he's at MIT, but you forget about the consciousness. And as you said, and we're told by Annie as well, is the fact that that love consciousness, that really compassionate, forgiving consciousness is what's so important in the transformation of life. We can talk about the physics of, how the shroud got to be, the image on it that you see today, but really behind all that is the higher consciousness field that I think we all share in.
And behind that is the teachings. I just was curious if we can go, from the physics of the shroud to like, why is Jesus such an important figure and what are the teachings? But what were you going to say, Whitley, before that?
This is a great discussion, I must say, and I thank you for doing this on behalf of my book, on behalf of Jesus: A New Vision, which is, I'm very grateful for that. I think that actually this is a good inflection point, Alan, that there's a question about the height of the man of the shroud. I've got it in my book. I remember we know his precise height. Do either of you recall, or Alan, what his height was? He was unusually tall for his place and time, by the way. Well, I think he was 5'9".
We could measure it from the shroud. I mean, the shroud.
No, it's been carefully measured. There's lots of.
It was less than 6 feet.
Yeah.
Is it 6 feet?
No, it's less.
Less than 6 feet.
I think he was 5'9". Thanks. Very kind of you.
This is Whitley's book.
It's saying 5'6" actually, but that I think
5'6", yeah.
5'6".
What does that? So where are you getting at with that, Whitley?
Well, someone keeps asking questions about his height.
Well, this is all online. I'd like to go to the teachings because this is why and your book highlights a lot of the key moments of how it applies to our life.
Let me make a breakthrough on how to put the two together. One of the things you'll notice in the shroud, if you look at the face, is it actually has a long nose and a long face. Now, Kabbalistically, or mystically, this was known as the one who had patience and compassion. You have the long-nosed one is one of the terms. The long-faced one is another term. So the fact, and this is even written up in Isaiah, that there would be one who was long, in patience. And that face actually exemplifies that. So I think that's important to understand that even the whole body that we're seeing, independent of the height, is really showing the whole energy body of contentment, of forgiveness, of compassion that represents the Christ being.
Right. I just want to read from the introduction that Whitley puts in that book. He says, I think that there is significant evidence that we are more than physical entities, that we are in fact moving through the stream of time in physical bodies in order to gather life's experience into a timeless part of ourselves. It is our greater part. In fact, it's the enrichment as the true purpose of life. So this is, I think, the lessons of why we're really talking about this person who achieved a certain level of mind. Hurtak say he came in with this. Whitley says he evolved towards it. That's sort of this point of difference here. Whitley, do you want to talk about why you say Jesus evolved towards that as a mortal, as a human, and what were the lessons of his life?
That's a very complex question.
Right.
One of the things that troubles me about this religion that evolved in the 4th century AD called Christianity, that had little to do with Jesus the Nazarene, the rabbi from Nazareth or from somewhere in Palestine, is that it elevates him to a non-human level and says he is not one of us, that we should follow his example, but that we cannot ever reach his reality within ourselves. But that's not his teaching at all. His teaching, the path of Jesus, is a path to share in every way in us what he was. And so while it's clear that there was something very extraordinary going on then, I don't think personally that he was not human. I think that if you could go back there and give him a medical examination a year before his crucifixion, you would find a human being. And you would, if you extracted his DNA, you would find human DNA. But there's hidden in the Gospels, it's a shadowy presence. There's somebody else, as I referred to earlier. There are who was obviously, there was an organization behind Jesus that never reaches the surface of history at all. It reappears one more time when Paul, who is then Saul, still Saul, he is just martyred, the first martyr, St. Stephen, in Jerusalem, and he's on his way to Damascus to root out and kill more Christians, more Jesus followers, I should say. They weren't called Christians then. When he has his moment of enlightenment, he is physically blinded. Then he's taken to the house of Ananias, and this rough and tumble Roman sympathizer goes to the house of Ananias, blinded by the light, and comes out an extraordinarily insightful and knowledgeable theologian. Now, I understand why his Greek was much better than the Greek of the gospel writers, because he was a much more educated man. But it was a phenomenal transformation, and the theological insights in Paul, not all of them obviously are perfect, but many of them are very profound. Who taught him? What happened in the house of Ananias? What was this transformation about? Did the light itself transform him in this way? Or was there some organization there? I think there was an organization, and I think that organization goes way back in human history. I think that same inner group, the knowledgeable group, or the group that built the Sphinx, the original Sphinx, not the later ones, but the original one. I think that they were responsible for Hermes Trismegistus, the Hermetic teaching. I think that they are responsible for the hidden teaching in the Tarot of Marseille, which I go into in my little book, The Path. And I think they may still even be here, because after all, Jesus did say at one point that if we did not take up the path, he would return like a thief in the night. And in 1898, what happens is we get a picture of him, a photograph of it. He did return then, didn't he? Like a thief in the night, not directly, but he's back. That's what that picture is about. He did return at the end of time, and when we are moving rapidly toward the conclusion of this whole ideation of human history. We're going to be very different soon in the future, and it's going to be an extraordinary transition, and not altogether by any means an easy one. But JJ and Desiree, I think that the two of you might have a lot to add here, because I know you're very aware of otherworldly influences, and I'd like you to expand on this and to it's not a debate here, but I think you've got some very valuable information that's different from mine.
Well, I love the energy you bring forth. Of course, the Pistis Sophia book that we put together actually was about 1999. It's a 2,000-year-old text. It's 2nd century, before the Catholic Church and everyone kind of took control. Now, you can ask whether it's valid or not valid. That's up to the reader. I mean, it's true for any of the ancient scriptures.
We translated from the Greek and the Coptic because we are scholars in the ancient languages.
Yeah, we're one of the few people that did the most
5
commentary of the 5 volumes. Some people consider there's 6. But it actually says that not only did Jesus come from these other realm realities, but he even had his disciples come down when he came down with him, which I think is a little, odd thinking. I mean, did he go out and just find, some guy that was like interested in him, or, was a good fisherman and said, oh, come be with me? Or was this really more, I hate to say mathematically inclined, energized, like synchronicities, where he came and found the ones that were on this planet. So
Sophia means faith, Sophia, wisdom brought together. And in this remarkable book, Jesus uses the word light year. This is a term that doesn't appear until the 20th century. So there's a lot of science and psychology.
Go ahead.
In fact, I even went back to the Greek myself to see if you were right, and you were.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot to be said
that they didn't know in those times. That's for sure.
No, but they understood the different realities. Mostly this talks about the multi-dimensions and how influential other dimensional realities are on our physical reality. That's really the essence of this book. And we'll be talking about it, as Neil knows, next Saturday about the same time. So I hope some of you can join us on that.
And speaking about bioluminescence, many of you know I've had a remarkable experience which shifted me from academia into the quest of understanding why we need a new cosmology. This was taken just about 20 years ago when I was in Mexico, and you can see the light around my body that occurred instantaneously when I was chanting the names of God and of Christ in the Greek and the Hebrew.
But let me say,
so is there a hidden code within the scripture itself, which means that you can excite, as it were, the energy field of the body biophotonically, in some instances of doing remarkable healing, remarkable miracle work, where suddenly the aura around your body increases and people see that we have this divine human potential? For me, the Jesus story is the human divine partnership, that we are both human and divine. It's the Christ waking up within us that's the importance of the shroud, because historians and material-minded scientists can't understand why there is this glowing aspect around this man in this state of weightlessness.
But I have to say, Jesus also said, greater things than these ye shall do. And I think we have to take that literally, especially now, 2,000 years later, as you said, Whitley, with the changes going on this planet, we can do amazing things. One of the things I know Alan and we talk about in some of our conferences is use our consciousness mind to make a difference. If a hurricane is coming through, like it was to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, use some energy to, if it be the divine will, to move it to the side so it wouldn't hit the main part of the town. There was a fire here in Sedona, where we are right now, earlier in the year in the summertime, and people were getting afraid. We said, neutralize the fire, use that energy, move mountains, so to speak, and you can do amazing things.
What happened?
But yeah, the fire went away, and the monsoon started coming back that hadn't been here for 2 years. So these are things that we can do, and I think more things than we can do. We can even probably heal people amazingly, like Jesus showed. We just have to have that kind of faith and belief. Let me go on, though, to go back to something unique about what you were saying about the DNA for human. I would believe absolutely, like you said, that Jesus would have had human DNA. Now, Melchizedek is another mystical figure, although written in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and Jesus is supposedly a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Let me read what Hebrews 7:2-3 says.
The New Testament.
Yeah, so he was the king of Salem, king of peace, without father and mother or genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like a son of God. This is Melchizedek. This is not Jesus. So he manifested on this planet. I don't know what his DNA would have looked like, as he was kind of unique. And he obviously was here long enough to be a king of Salem. I mean, that had to be not just like overnight. And angels appear, that would be overnight. You probably couldn't catch their DNA. But anyway, he was fatherless and motherless. So it goes along with what the avatars are saying in the Far East. And the avatars supposedly come from these higher dimensions. Anytime there is an energy on this planet that needs healing, help, or whatever, then the avatars are sent in, one by one or whenever it's needed for that. And although I would claim that Jesus is even more than an avatar, if we can just get to the point of understanding that a being can come from a higher dimension and manifest into this reality, like it says in Luke 1, where Mary is seeing this angel and he says to her, look, she says, I'm a virgin. How am I going to have a kid right now? And he goes, you're going to be overshadowed by the Holy Spirit. So he wasn't motherless. He was fatherless in that sense. And I think we have to realize this. One other thing, going back to Whitley, and then also going to Neil, because Neil was talking about, he did a show on some of this special, we'll say, what were they, Neil? Some
miraculous conception, virgin births.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's fabulous. But let me just say for Whitley, I mean, you saw alien intelligence. You wrote about it for the whole world to know about. And I would think when you were 10 years old, if someone said to you, you know, do you think you'd ever see aliens? You probably would have said no, but you did, and you had to write about it. Then you probably would have said when you were 20, you would never hear from your wife coming back to you. You know, that was an opening. And I think now we have to see the many levels, not only extraterrestrials, not only celestials, which is like your wife, I would claim that she is in that dimensional level.
But also ultra-terrestrial.
And that's higher dimensional realities. We write about this in Alan's book, Making Contact. So we feel that all those levels of intelligence are interconnecting with us, and especially now, those veils, like you said, the temple was torn in two, the curtain of the temple. I think that's happening today.
In 1973, I saw my mystical experience, the Christ in the body of light. That changed my life. And I had repeated experiences of using the divine names. And again, this is usually the area of the work of the saints, of mystics, artists, and musicians to reach higher frequencies where paraphysical events take place. But we understand that in the overall tree of life, there are the cosmic others that are in the bodies of light.
Well, let Whitley respond, because he has a bunch of he has a lot to say about this.
Yeah, probably does. I always have a lot to say. Well, first of all, I think that these comments are wonderful, and I think that the central comment, the central thrust of them is a word that JJ briefly stated, which is awakening. We have to awaken. What we're going to be facing here is this, and it's very clear from the last climate conference that science can't change this. It can't save it. It's too late. And what you were saying, Desiree, is the only direction, and it has always been the only direction. We in the West are taught that that is the impossible direction, that can't be done, that the monsoons that came to Sedona were just a coincidence, that hurricanes don't move on will. But once we take our place as stewards of the earth and part of the earth, and see ourselves and understand our energy as being connected to this planet, we have a chance of saving it for ourselves and having a future here. Otherwise, we will not have a future here.
Well, I think that's what the essence of this discussion is, that we have to rise to this greater sense of ourselves. I think that's what the core of your book is about.
And who's the guide? The guide is this man, this extraordinary being, Jesus. In all of his, he showed us the way to become a new kind of body.
I think this is what JJ and Desiree are saying too, as we follow that greater cosmology. It's just the origin points that may be a little.
Can I make a comment?
You get this gets instantly absorbed and crushed in Christian theology. Christian theology, and in Jesus and New Vision, in the first part of the book, we talk about the origins of Jesus. We talk about doctrine. We talk about the meaning of his teachings, the meaning of the parables, the meaning of the all-important Gospels of Thomas and Mary. And then in the second part, the whole trajectory of the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity. And you see immediately that those two things had absolutely nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus. In fact, they left the teachings of Jesus behind. And in order to get back to those teachings, we have to recreate our relationship with him. Or with that energy. I don't want to say him, because we're beyond that now. We know now that this is a very different level of energy that doesn't have a sexual connotation at all. It has all sexual energy within it, and much more energy of different kinds. So, but we have to recognize ourselves as instruments of our planet and instruments of the universe, not as, for God's sakes, what have we become? Slave consumers.
Right.
We're so much more. And this life, as it is lived here now, is transient and meaningless. We seek a life of meaning, and that's what we're going to have to find if we're going to save our planet.
Right. Neil, did you want to jump in with a little quick?
I love what Willie just said right there, and that goes into what I was going to say. I like to expand it, to incorporate all cultures and religions, and I just want to kind of show the similarities here, right? Like that, showing us the way, right? And what I really like about the ancient Vedic texts and Upanishads is that, for example, in Hinduism, I was raised Hindu, even though I never really believed until later when I became spiritual, I started understanding a bigger concept of it. They talk about different avatars coming down to the planet based on the time and the culture, right? So within that, there's completely an agreement that religions exist that are other religions that aren't part of this Vedic lineage that will come for specific groups of people all over the planet. And that's when the story of Saint Ishta comes in the Hindu text, and the fact that they even, like, I grew up as a Hindu completely believing in Jesus, right? And my literally hardcore Hindus. And most Hindu people are open to that awareness, and it's because of what Willie had said, basically came down to show us the way. So all these avatars, Rama, we have Buddha, different prophets come down all to show us the way. And then the human element comes in and manipulates it a little bit. And one element would be like, I am the only way, right? People mistranslate that to this is the only way. And I just want to share this comparison of Krishna and Jesus, because I just did a whole 2-hour podcast literally comparing Jesus and Krishna. And just a couple of weeks ago, it's on Truth Seeker YouTube. And this is one quote that shows that there's so many similarities and almost exact same words. For example, in the Krishna Ayurveda, it says, in the beginning was Brahman, and Brahman was with God. What does that sound like, right? That's from Hindu text. But this quote right here, I'm just going to say really quick, is, if I can find it.
In the beginning was the word.
That one for sure. That's the connection to it. So I know people understand that. But Lord Krishna said about his oneness with God, I am the way, come to me. Neither the multitudes of gods nor great sages knows my origin, for I am the source of all gods. And then what did Jesus say? I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. So it's the same thing, right? They're saying the same stuff. And people, I think, have mistranslated it as this is the only way, you need to follow this individual, and that's how you're going to get enlightenment. But we see that they're actually talking metaphorically about, living like they did, showing us the way, not being like, oh, you need to worship me, but showing us how to live in order for us to get to this level of enlightenment.
It's the I am, though. He says, I am the way. It's the I am.
I understood that this was an hour.
Oh, do you have to go soon, Whitley?
Yes, I do.
But yes.
Oh, okay, so why don't do you want to I know I wanted to get to the teachings and the Beatitudes and all that. Do you want to just leave with some of that work that you put into it, the Beatitudes?
Well, yeah, I retranslated the Beatitudes. I don't think I can, maybe I can read them. I don't know.
Well, or leave us with some.
Well,
because this is we could go on for hours, and it's so interesting.
I know.
That's okay. We can pick up a second part.
I would suggest this, that we remember ourselves, that the Beatitudes are, the beginning of it is the 42 laws of Ma'at, which are negative laws. That do not do this, do not do that. Then something comes in the 10 Commandments, which is a mixture of negative and positive admonitions. And then the Beatitudes are a very different thing. They demand that you think about your life Blessed are the strong but meek, the strong but gentle. It's always just, translated as meek, but that's not the right word. The right translation of that word is strong and gentle. And that is the way we need to be. We cannot be violent. We must not let violence get into our lives in any way. So if I could leave anyone with anything, it is to take the journey on your own terms. And we were talking a moment about paths and different paths. There is a path born every few seconds. It's called a human being. And there are as many paths as there are faces on the planet. And they all have the same central axis, which is that column of light within the body that we call now, wrongly, an anatomical feature, the spine. But it is actually the place where we connect to our true selves through the physical and beyond it. I guess this is what I have to say, and I must now go.
Great. Just showed Whitley's book again, Neil. Thanks, Whitley. We'll be in touch. Maybe we'll do a part 2. And I'll just finish up with the Hurtak.
Whitley, you affirm that Jesus coming back into human consciousness is a step forward. That we're going into a tremendous acceleration of consciousness where the Christ awareness, the Christ spark of divinity is being nurtured within us in new and exciting ways. And that's the important contribution you are making at this time.
He is, but also JJ and Desiree, some people asked, what's the difference between Jesus and the cosmic Christ, which is what you'll be talking about next year. So let's give them a little next week, a preview of what you'll be talking about.
Well, you see behind us this amazing art form. It's a scroll that shows the outpouring of the divine names behind Desiree's head, the names in the genealogy of Christ. Jesus Christ is the title of one who is anointed. It is a word that's interchangeable with the Hebrew word Mashiach or Messiah. Yes. And in this new book, we go to the 76 names of Jesus' genealogy mentioned in the 3rd chapter of Luke. Again, Whitley and others have been interested in the end of the story, which is Luke 24, with the cloth of Turin, or the shroud. But we're going to the very beginning of the story to show that Jesus comes now from a higher spiritual anthropology. Not only avatars, but connected with the Godhead itself. And this was my experience in 1973 when I was lifted up here physically in a different dimension. I saw Christ surrounded by this tremendous light and this tremendous glory, which led me to retranslate the entirety of Scripture from the original Hebrew and Greek text.
But speaking to the answer to your question, actually, Jesus literally is the Greek word for the Hebrew word of Yeshua, which means Savior. And that was what Mary was told to call him in her experience. So it's really the energy related to our earth, and we would say into the local multidimensional realms as well. But that actually, one of the things I wanted to say, and I was too bad Whitley isn't here, that Jesus also is, we don't think works alone. Not only is he connected with the Trinity that people have talked about from, all last 2,000 years, but also he's connected with Melchizedek, as I mentioned. He's a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And in the Pissa Sophia, it's talked about not only Melchizedek, but he's also connected with Michael and Gabriel. And again, this is 2nd century before all the Catholic Church came into reality. So the fact that he works as we'll say a hierarchy or a family, we rather call it a holarchy, is also important. One of our books that we came out with is called Over Self-Awakening, A Guide to the Schoolhouse of the Soul. And ultimately, at the highest level, we ourselves take on the Christ consciousness. And what Whitley was saying, when we really achieve that inner peace, that inner understanding, that power of forgiveness and love, unconditional love, then we start connecting with our higher self, and ultimately our higher self evolves into a Christed overself or a Christed cosmic being.
So is it possible for everyone to become a cosmic Christ?
Definitely. But in the sense of humility, in the sense of receiving that which is from above. In other words, the genetic engineering from above as opposed to from below, because we are within a short period of biological life. We don't have, unless you are basically a human avatar, the opportunity to bring together all of those energies of sublimation, of activation, a miracle working that would be necessary to take you to the higher worlds.
I think most people who are working with these cosmic forces and energies, they realize it's a co-participation. We have to have the consciousness, we have to have the intention to help others. And I think that's the key right now when we were talking about the end of the, all the changes going on the planet. If we have the right intention and put it out there to help humanity, the changes in our lives really go crazy, and we're able to do more and more and more. And the more you work with that flow of helping others, the more that energy comes to you. And I think that that is part of the work of the Holy Spirit. That's the energy that Jesus said, I go my way to the Father, but I leave you the power of the Holy Spirit.
And that's the difference between the first 3 centuries of Christianity being directed through the Holy Spirit, where you had miracles upon miracles.
Like lights over
millions of people
heads.
came into the teaching of Christ, as opposed to the church after the Council of Nicaea, where everything was dogmatized, ritualized, and enforced in terms of geopolitical codes that were basically opposite what I will call the higher tradition of mystical Judaism that Jesus was showing and taking to a much higher level of our involvement with him as the way shower, the messianic figure that brings the light into the human creation story.
I mean, his disciples were doing healing. They had lights seen over their heads. They were speaking, they say speaking in different languages that are earth languages so people could hear them and understand them. I mean, amazing things came forth from the people that were in resonance with the Christ. And I think this is going to happen again, that we all will have that activation if we seek to share in that spiritual work.
Right.
And I appreciate Whitley's new book, because he's able to really go a long ways from where he was, before, and then his wife speaking to him. And
he's also challenging science. And then this is where we come in, having backgrounds both in spiritual training as well as the biblical archaeology, working with the biblical languages, but also in our training, also a scientist of working with the image enhancement techniques of the shroud. And again, I want to repeat this because it perhaps went too fast for many of the listeners, that in 1973, I had this remarkable experience of seeing the face of Christ in light, and I saw over the mouth an Aramaic letter, an aleph, and in the keys of Enoch, key 211, there is an anatomical drawing of the Christ figure with the aleph over the chin area. It was not until in the last, so we say, 15, 17 years, that scholars in re-examination of the shroud have found the same Aramaic type letter over the chin, hidden by the beard. And this is important because the keys validate the shroud validates the keys. It's very important. We are living, Desiree and I believe, in the advent of the return of Christ as the cosmic Christ, aligned with the other prophets.
And I think it's very important in terms of our belief, and I would probably speak for Whitley as well, that if Christ returns, it's going to be from the heavens, not going to be in spaceships necessarily, and it's not going to be alone. It's going to be a cosmic awakening. Literally, the portals, the doorways, the vortex points are going to open, and we're going to be connected with literally those beings that had been there, we'll say even 2,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, time of Abraham, the time of the avatars, even going back further. So I don't want to take too much of everyone's time.
But just give us a little hint about what you're going to be teaching next week.
Right. No, well, I thought also Neil had a question. I wouldn't mind covering that, because I think it's interesting about the study you had done with the sacred centers for the.
Oh, what are you talking about? Which one? The virgin births? Is that it?
Virgin births, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we did this webinar with Margaret Rigoloso a couple of months ago, and it was all about virgin births. And she went through even historical records that Pythagoras had a virgin birth, right? And the whole component was that she, through doing research of ancient history, realized there was this ancient divine feminine mystery school that basically did certain rituals and practices in order to tap into a frequency vibration, and the womb, being a portal from one dimension to another, would basically tap into this frequency so that a soul could come in from that specific dimension. And then from her further research, going back in time, there was all this connection to the Pleiades, and that an energy being coming from a dimension of the Pleiades. And then we see that all throughout our text. We see the number 7 for the 7 star systems, right, of the Pleiades. And then we also see a lot of the Greeks, right, and a lot of where these stories come from in the ancient past, also talking about the Pleiades. So that was kind of the generality of what we discussed.
Well, the womb is a sacred portal. How else could a soul energy emerge into this 3D plane except through a sacred
right, so
portal?
it's an intentional connection to a specific realm of frequency to pull in a certain soul.
Yeah, and I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think when we'll say, even whether it's the Eastern, the avatars, or the West, when you know something is not right, you ask for a higher help, you ask for higher guidance, and it can come in many ways, in a personal way, in a local way, or it can come in a very high divine way, like manifestations of avatars, as you're saying. And we also agree that the Pleiades, actually Dr. Hurtak in his book said that really the Pleiades is the cradle for our own Adamic species.
Key 107, the Keys of Enoch.
But we do believe that beyond the Pleiades and beyond Orion is really a vortex into the Father universe, what we call the greater realms beyond this local, we call this realm we're living in, and that's with everything you can see and also the multidimensional realities within it, a SON, sun universe. And that's an experimental realm. And the Father universe shoots off branches of sun universes, and the hierarchies or holarchies around there develop themselves into being like trying to be divine realms like the Father universe, and it's all these experimental realms.
They use the mothering principle of incarnation. So this is very important. We're just completing a new CD, which is called the Ciphers of the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother is seen in the Greek and the Aramaic as Alma. The concept of the mothering aspect was known in ancient Oriental scriptures and sutra text, or that you could have physical birth without a mother, you could have birth instantaneously, you could have birth to a long biological process of 9 to 10 months. In essence, the ancient world teachings show that the mothering principle goes with the teachings of the avatar or the messianic figure.
And going back to what you said, to me, there's a need that's known in the higher worlds about the need for the manifestation, whether it's of Jesus or an avatar, that's known in the higher worlds, but it takes the energy, as you were describing, of, we'll say, the sacred places, the people that ask for help, the woman that is open to receiving that energy. And of course, the angel came and said, he maybe didn't say, are you ready? He said, this is going to happen. But I'm sure if she said no, he wouldn't have done it. I mean, that's how free will works on this side. But it takes also our co-participation to receive that energy. It's always
a good
asked.
example is the Ramayana story, which was literally an intentional call out to the universe for Rama to come down to bring balance to the evil, the demonic forces that have been on the planet, right? Same kind of story there.
Well, that's the story
and
of
I think we all need to
Sophia, though.
do
Jesus
that now.
kind of bringing out the divine wisdom of the feminine from the
but it
lower
really
levels.
is a co-participation. We have to have the intention, the openness to receive and to initiate that aspect, but also the other side really knows about the energy coming down and when it's needed. So it really works together. It's like a synchronicity. So the other side needs us, we need the other side to work together. And that's what's happening right now. And I think we should all do a prayer for sending positive energy to this planet to bring the light, to bring the solutions that we need for this planet.
Why don't you end with a little prayer? We're going to pick up this discussion about the cosmic Christ, how to manifest that in the cosmologies of the Hurtaks and the levels of universes that exist in consciousness. And what is that book there, JJ?
Yeah, that's the 72 Names of the Divine Mother. And probably by February, March, we're coming out with a similar book on the 76 names of the cosmic Christ.
Each name is illustrated. We work with more than 20 languages as scholars, showing that there is a weaving that takes place in intellectual history, both in the East and the West. But that requires the involvement with the Holy Spirit. Without the Holy Spirit and the energy of inner transformation, it's all words, all documents. That's what Whitley was indicating. You have all of these scientists who pontificate on this and that, but none of them have had a real genuine rebirth or re-energizing of their body cell by cell.
Which we need now at this critical time.
And this is what
of
we
change.
show you in our work, dealing with the names of the divine and how they can be used and how miracles can take place. And we've been involved with miracles and people of all denominations, primarily of the Abrahamic traditions worldwide, to show this is the time of the collective gathering of the tribes. Humanity from one side of the world is waking up. No more of the plastic hologram, no more of the three-dimensional materialism, no more of the old science that is anti-feminine. We're seeing just the opposite, the rebirth, as Jesus showed in his birth, the divine mother and the divine son coming together. And we have been able to see in the ancient documents, time does not permit this time, but when your next program will go into this, how there is a plethora of documents showing that Jesus was indeed a manifestation of the cosmic sonship or daughterhood that had to be blessed, that had to come forth. So let us meditate.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Alan, would join us as well because you often meditate with us. But just to also announce, so people can join us next Saturday, same time as this program. I think it goes for 2 hours. It's just going to be just us. There's a slight charge for that. And otherwise, our website is keysofenoch.org.
Well, while we're announcing things, I'm going to be in Providence. I'm talking about my new book on December 18th, Providence, Rhode Island. And then me and the Hurtaks are going to be in St. Petersburg at the Cosmic Center. That's January 14th and 15th, right?
And then the New Life
Expo, January 23rd.
And the Conscious Life Expo in LA too.
And the Conscious Life first weekend of February. So catch us at some of those places. We're going to be talking more about the alien contact, which is also about this uplifting of the higher energies, especially as we talk about it from this spiritual point of view. So thank you both. Let's do a little meditation.
You lead us off and then I'll go and then Dr. Hurtak. Yeah.
Okay. So just everyone close their eyes and take in all the energy and information you've heard from here, the wisdom of Whitley Strieber and everything he's been through, and the great research and wisdom and life experiences of the Hurtaks, and see that face of the greater being that you are. See the emanations of light, like we are being resurrected through the light body to a higher form of humanity. See the light coming through the top of your head, coming through the bottom of your feet, igniting the cells of your body with light frequency.
And in this crown of light, this great light around our face, around all parts of our body, we realize that we're as much in space as space is within us. As we're lifted off the cross of space and time, the new image of Christ returns to us as the image of eternity, that we are all part of this great Adamic design that goes back to the cosmic atom, the higher plan of creation implanted within the human evolutionary process, to feel the spark of the divine.
And let us feel that presence of the cosmic Christ, even hovering around us, embracing us with his arms or his wings, whichever way you see it, feeling that unconditional love that represents who he is in the greater dimensions. Let us realize, in terms of quantum physics, there really is no separation between each other and between the heavenly realms. No matter how far away, we are at one with that cosmic dimension. When we open our hearts, open our minds, open our consciousness to receive the light of the Christ vibration.
As we see we see the blue-green planet spinning, we see the coming of the Christed intelligence back to Mother Earth, the connection of the human evolution with the higher evolution, the partnership of the divine and the human together in a dance of glory. As Jesus danced upon the waters of light, so also our greater creation story dances upon the waters. As he taught his disciples, Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Let the divine names that he used open, as it were, the cosmic code of higher vibration of the Holy Divine Spirit, that we shall be taken into the specter of the coming of the heaven, the kingdom of the glory of God to earth as it is in heaven, as embedded in the greatest prayer ever given to the human
Okay, let
tradition.
Neil finish. Let Neil jump in here with a little prayer.
No, please finish first. This is a meditation. I would like for it just to continue.
Okay.
You know,
So
so
I just
please
say-
finish your text.
Take all this knowledge, information, and see the merging of the light. See our human bodies being elevated to a light frequency. And when we go out into the world, look at each person through the eyes of the Christ. Look at them to see their divinity and be reminded of our own divinity. For this is the time of divine immersion. Blessed be. Thank you all. Blessing on the Hurtaks and their teachings. And it's a portal to ascension that we are all in at this moment. Neil.
Thank you so much. And yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for the download and the activation. But now let's, before we close out, let's show a few events. Let's show the Cosmic Christ event again to everybody. And I'm going to close out with a poem entitled Christ Consciousness. So perfect theme right here. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So I just want to invite everybody next week. I'm going to show you this event first, and then I'm going to show you other upcoming events. But this is the next one on Portal to Ascension, and this event was leading up to it, starting the conversation. So I love what we did here, having this discussion, because now we're going to go even deeper with the Hurtaks next week, the Cosmic Christ, and understanding a multidimensional universe. And
I just want to say one thing, Neil. One thing about JJ, he is. If you see him, he is emanating that frequency in that state he's in now. Do you see it? Do you see it coming?
Oh, I mean, JJ's smile, like when he just cracks that little smirk right there.
He is.
I can feel the vibration.
In that state.
You're right.
Wait, you're muted, JJ. You're muted. Wait, unmute him.
Okay.
I wanted to say that behind my head is the picture from the great artist in Mexico, Armando Nava, who was painting the picture of Christ in the heavens, the Cosmic Christ. It's part of our new book with the 76 names, all illustrated by great artists of the Cosmic Christ, who was not simply here as a pious teacher in the Holy Land for 3 years, but one who came from the higher realms with a higher cosmology that we're beginning to understand now through great scientific and spiritual discoveries of self-realization. So we are at a part of opening our heart, opening our mind, opening our spirit. The eye of the heart, the eye of the mind, the eye of the spirit must come together in this trinitized realization that we are being invited to join the divine family. And this is your theme, Alan, in your book, Making Contact. The inner self-realization within that we are having the divine family. The outer contact story of the light that we begin to understand. And finally, the two embrace, as we see in Michelangelo's picture in the Sistine Chapel of the hand of man reaching into the hand of God. This is the time of the cosmic contact story, and the spiritual side must not be left out of the picture. This is why your work, Alan, is so important. Neil, your work was so important. The work of the great illustrators of the Cosmic Christ. Come forth, tell us your story, for we are going back into family.
And thank you for this great opportunity, Neil. Want to hear your...
So Neil, show that. Can I show the name of that workshop again up at the top?
Right here, yeah. And I'm going to read this last sentence from it because it really says a lot here.
The Cosmic Christ and understanding our multidimensional universe. Okay, go ahead.
And I also want to make a comment that we had someone in the YouTube, and also we had an email from someone saying that, I've really turned away from religion. I don't want to hear this kind of information. And what I want to say to that is that every avatar that's walked the planet, like legitimate avatar, has never said create a religion out of me. When we speak about these individuals, we're not talking about the religion that came out of them. We're talking about the message that they share. And because of the age that we've been in, the age of authority, which is literally the symbol of the Kali Yuga, we have given everybody this, put people on pedestals. It's also might as well be called the age of the pedestals. Like we put people up on this hierarchy, and we're now shifting out of that. So we're able to take these messages these avatars had and integrate them in a way we couldn't do for 2,000 years because of the level of consciousness we're at. So it's beyond that. And somebody also said, connecting to nature. Well, these individuals are talking about connecting to ourselves, connecting to each other. And yes, that is being a part and realizing that we're not separate from nature, but we're one with it, right? And that's really what I feel is just the basics of the messages that a lot of these individuals have for us that come to this planet. And a lot of us, our Messiah is now walking, right? We're raising our frequencies. The Messiah is resurrecting in all of us. So let me read this from the write-up that JJ and Desiree gave me. We also begin to accept the fact that we are not alone in the universe. And so we begin to develop a greater Christ consciousness of love, forgiveness, compassion, and understanding. During this event, there will also be a guided meditation that leads us into the understanding of other dimensional realities. So come join the wisdom and the experience. So if you would like to be a part of this this workshop, again, as always, you get unlimited replay access. Just go to PortalToAscension.org, hit the online events tab, and it's the first event right there. It's going to be amazing. Okay, and now I'm just going to share a few more events. And Alan, please do jump in if you would like to.
Well,
what else we have coming up is after that, we're doing a 6-month series with Michael Tellinger right now. He hasn't done a lot of presentations the last 2 years. He only did one, actually, and that was with us in the last 2 years. And now we're doing a 6-month expose on a lot of research, a lot of archaeological evidence coming out of South Africa, because he's been there doing a lot of research since then. So it's a really full circle awareness series. If you'd like to be a part of it, you can sign up for one of them. You can sign up for all 6. We're also doing our first ever freestyle poetic expression workshop, helping you release creative blocks and then freestyling poetry on the workshop together. And that's going to be basically a throat chakra activation workshop with my great friend, Brendan Culleton from Paradigm Shift Central. The next day after that, I am doing a presentation that I've been trying to put together for 10 years. And it's called The Truth, the Life, and the Times of Pythagoras. We're going to talk about the times of the city-states in Greece, who Pythagoras was, what he was trying to research at in his university, and also did he get initiated into mystery schools? Is there any evidence for that? What did he understand about standard harmonics? And how did we give him the title of the founder and discoverer of geometry, even though no one truly is a finder of it, they only rediscover it. So that's going to be an amazing presentation on December 19th. And on the solstice, December 21st, and this is for everyone on YouTube and all the people in the room right now, I am doing my annual presentation that continues to grow every single year on YouTube, and it's called The Pagan Origins of Christmas and New Year's Eve. And we're going to be, it's basically half the presentation is about the Roman Empire, what happened at the time, what happened with different tribes, the Germanic tribes, the Visigoths, what kind of, what different tribes basically had what practices and how they were actually implemented into the Roman Catholic Church. And it's extremely interesting. But the most interesting part is, what does psychedelic mushrooms have to do with Christmas? I'm gonna need this mascara. That's what we're gonna be talking about. So stay tuned for that. And I'll leave everybody with this one. And Alan, you can jump in on it because we're doing this together. Is the Walk-Ins Conference. The 2-day Walk-Ins Conference is how we're going to start the next year, and it's our second annual event. And Alan, do you want to just share your excitement?
No, this was a revolutionary conference when we did it last year, because walk-ins means levels of consciousness that are now emerging on the planet. So it has a traditional meeting where souls exchange, but it also has a new kind of understanding where the higher consciousness is being infused into the everyday human being. So this is sort of the brainchild of Sheila Seppi, who wrote a book from many different perspectives. So in essence, it is, the subtitle is called The Cosmology of the Soul. And so it's frequencies of souls. We have some great speakers here. Phil Gruber's an old friend of mine. We have, wait, go back up to the speakers there, Neil. Back down to the speakers. Just want to talk about some of the people there. Karen Swain is an Australian woman who's very keen on this understanding. A lot of these people have had instant upgrades. And this is, if you find yourself at a place where maybe you were depressed, or maybe you were ill, or maybe you were seriously existential, or what's the point of it? And suddenly you have a burst of new vision. Perhaps your soul's been upgraded. This is one aspect of this walk-in conference. It goes into much more detail, but there is a time of transformation here and a time of hope. And that's why we're presenting this conference in the beginning of the year, January 8th and 9th. So sign up here, Portal to Ascension. It's the only place you're going to find a conference like this. So thanks.
Yes. Okay, beautiful. So everybody, please do stay tuned. So everybody in the Zoom room, if you would like to go to YouTube and subscribe, that'd be amazing. YouTube.com/PortalToAscension. And everybody in the YouTube, if you want to go to our website and subscribe, that'd be awesome too, because then you can get updates on all the information that we're doing. 2022 is just, we're taking it to another level. Every year, we really do expand all the information that we're sharing. And there's a lot of exciting things in store.
Well, I also want to say there was a lot of people listening on my YouTube channel.
Yes.
And subscribe to that if you're listening, if you're watching on youtube.com/new realities. We could always use more subscriptions. We have a whole bunch of videos that I've done over the past 20 years with the Hurtaks. And we also
want to thank you, Alan. We want to thank you, Neil. We want to thank the audience. Remember, in the book of Daniel, the prophet, knowledge will speed up at the end of time. We believe that this is a speed up of knowledge, but Daniel also says we will be connected with the stars of intelligence. Hebrew, Kezor, or Kihamastik, or being, we are making contact with the cosmic others. So please, all of you, regardless of your tradition, go back to the original Word of God and see it as a musical text of dance, of joy, of celebration, of divine fellowship.
And you guys are the ones also helping to get that information out. So we'll sign out, and I'm going to listen off camera for
Thank you guys. No, we're finished, and
I'm just gonna close out with the poem.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, you can. Neil
All right,
always
thank
has
you.
some great. Neil's art is not just Portal to Ascension. It's bringing through the poetry of these concepts into a kind of a cosmic flow. So, JJ, I think you'll enjoy this.
All right, everybody. So thank you again to all you beautiful people out there. The replay is available immediately on YouTube. So if you want to check this back, please do go ahead and do that. And I'm going to close out with this poem. And this is called The Traveler. When I wrote this around 11 years ago, I was thinking of Christ consciousness and Jesus incarnation. But just as my mind works, it really expands to what does that mean for all faiths and traditions that have come about in the ancient past. So it's really beyond this. It's about the soul incarnating and having these avatar experiences on earth. So again, love you all. Closing out with The Traveler. The resurrected one. Many times faced incarnation, simultaneously happening, the desolation, sun explosion, implosion, creating a rip in space and time. For me to travel with the universal mind into planetary systems faster than the galactic kind, where the laws of physics no longer apply, where the energetic beings reside, going faster than the speed of light. Mass increases to infinity, omnipresence of my energy, one with the celestial melody. Harmoniously find the frequencies that are hidden from sight. I left the density of struggle, resistance, and fight. The lessons have been learned, so it's time to climb up the dimensional ladder onto the next multiversal ride as a quasi-physical being, half flesh and half light. The metaphysical, metaphorical, quantum theoretical truth of mankind, full disclosure of the cosmic kind, resurrect the Christ consciousness, let the bliss flow, and undergo the transition into the fifth world. Prophesies to be the end of human karmic woes and the duality of friends and foes. Know this, we're about to shift the human consciousness into the dimension that is next, a vortex to appear. You see, when people start to disappear, melt and dissolve the fear, the time is near for the revolution of consciousness to steer us into the galactic arms of the Milky Way, swim into the ether with abundance to the universe, we pray, eradicating the lack mentality, creating technology holistically that has never been seen through alchemy. Order is the result of anarchy, throwing off the center of your galaxy only temporarily during the ascension of our galaxy and all sentient beings. It is time for the ascension of our galaxy and all sentient beings.
Thank you, Neil. Great show today. Lots of people watching, really fun, great. I mean, I thought Whitley was very good, very deep, and the Hurtaks are always fantastic from the level they're coming through. So we're going to keep this quality of programming all through next year, and we got some exciting things. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to you.
All right, everybody. And then hopefully we'll see some of you next week, the Cosmic Christ event, exactly 7 days from now. So, okay, love you, Alan. Bye,
Thanks,
JJ.
Neil. Talk to you soon.
Right.
Thanks,
Talk later.
everybody.